Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 36 Cancel, and this is Coco the Weiss Cat. And as usual, I'm a bit late to the party, because today I want to make a deck tech for Bofuri. But see, here's the thing. It's been 2 months and I've got my 2 Bofuri decks. I'm pretty happy with them, and I enjoy playing with them a lot. However, they're a little stylized and have a lot of flair over function choices, so while the lists will be in the description, I wouldn't tout them as the most competitive choices out there. So what is? Well, see, that's the problem, and this is why it's taken me such a long time to talk about this. If you remember back to my set preview, I said that Bofuri was one of the most versatile and buildable sets that I've ever seen. You can pretty much mash anything with anything else, and it'll work pretty well. Well, you see, that's the problem, isn't it? If I'm going to make a kind of Bofuri archetype to do a deck tech on, what do I pick if you can just make anything work? And you really can. Now, with the exception of the Maple Tree combo, nothing is really locked into one specific package. So how do we build Bofuri? No, seriously, how? Someone tell me. I don't know. I mean, obviously I've built some decks, but when it comes to what's best or strongest, it's a bunch of question marks, and we could definitely look at some deck lists here to see what's winning out. But if you search Bofuri on Encore decks, you'll see just a hodgepodge of everything. You have some Sacrifice Maples, Machine God Maples, Atrocity Maples, Mei and Yuis, early plays for days, and all different level 1 combos. One of the more notable decks that placed in the Asia and Oceania Spring Fest was Yue from Strictly Broken's Information Warfare Green and Blue standby deck, which, by the way, if you break down all those key elements I just said, is a huge example of what I'm talking about with Bofuri here. And this is a deck that uses the Sally Brainstormer to basically kill you with 8 standby and finesse plays while utilizing a lot of the green and blue utility that Bofuri offers. At a glance, the deck appears to do nothing. However, Yue did make a good video about it that highlighted why being able to use the 8 standby while sticking to the technical package of green and blue was really good. Now personally, I think that's all well and good for someone like Yue, but this is one of those decks where I imagine the skill ceiling is extremely high and works for someone like him because the fundamentals he has are just that strong. He did mention that he'd make modifications to it if he played it again, and only played Bofuri because his Twitch chat wanted him to, also commenting that he doesn't care for the 1k1 builds. Nevertheless, this is a really interesting case study on how flexible Bofuri is, and if you're interested in that, I'd highly recommend to go watch his video. However, if you want to hear what a significantly worse player has to say about the rest of Bofuri, stick around and we're going to do something a little different. Instead of teching one particular deck archetype, we'll talk about the different level 1 and 3 packages, the staples around them, and a little bit about how to build them. So getting right into this, I think it makes the most sense to split Bofuri up into 3 different archetypes based on the most defining feature of the builds. Basically, this boils down to whether you choose to play Standby, the Loving Sacrifice combo, or neither. Now, you can also combine Standby with a Loving Sacrifice combo, but I never really liked how it played, and I don't think those 2 packages complement each other very well. So while I won't be talking about it, please feel free to experiment and tell me why I'm wrong. But yes, these are the 3 main Bofuri archetypes that I could really get to settle at the bottom of the strainer when I really sifted all the cards through it. So first, let's talk about Standby. Now, Standby diverges into basically 2 routes. Are you playing the level 1 combo, or are you running empty Standby? The level 3 Standby combo is trash, so we won't touch on it. But if you're running empty Standby, again, I think it's better to let the pros explain why this is so good, so I'll refer you back to Yue's video on how green and blue can carry you far with 8 Standby. But if you're running the level 1 combo, which a majority of the Bofuri Standby decks are, there are a bunch of staples and obvious choices to touch on. At the level 0, it's easier to define what your bread and butter is. Obviously, we want some Battlecraft Wizard Izzes in the deck since the level 0 Rickies set us up for the level 1 combo. Chomping down Maple, while not being remarkable as a standalone card, is also important because it puts cards in your waiting room. Split Sword Shin is another obvious piece for this kind of deck as he clocks for red and has a very dominating level 0 presence with his high power and chasing ability. And if you're packing a particular early play, Super Speed Sally is also a runner that gets a lot of power as well. And these are very much the staples. Now for your Brainstormer, Multicolored Sally is the obvious choice. Not having to clock for red in some scenarios, especially early game at 0 to standby, is amazing. The fact that she lets you discard and draw when you play a climax is also extra insurance that you can have a good standby target every turn. And of course, she's a tap self-searching Brainstormer. However, while I think she's the best choice, she's also expensive compared to the yellow Brainstormer that top checks 3 and adds 1, and the tap self-salvaging Mei. Both of these Brainstormers are also good, as Mei salvages and clocks for red, and Yue and Mei let you add more standby climaxes to your hand, which is great. I wouldn't fault anyone for picking any one of these 3 in a standby deck. As for the rest of the 0, it's going to depend on how you want your color balance to shape up, and we'll talk more about that as we move into the level 1. Now, at level 1, I'm going to talk about the choices you make surrounding the level 1 combo. Playing empty standby is fine, but again, I'd rather let Yue talk about that style, as he's kind of the one that brought it to our attention with Bofuri. Personally, I think it's a shame not to play the combo because it's just really cool. Walking Fortress Maple gets plus 1500 when she comes in, and with the standby climax, if you pitch another copy of herself, you get to salvage a character and then stand a character on the stage. And obviously, this is for a free filter and to stand up your standby target. There's stuff in 2 and 3 that goes into the standby package, but let's talk about level 1. So for your primary 1-1 target, Bofuri has the 1-1 7500 with Hand Encore, and it's a pretty obvious pick. But it also has a 1-1 6500 green Kasumi that lets you pay 1 and switch it with another character at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase. 6500 is a decent amount of power, and the role of this card is to take advantage of your standby targets that may not be in the front row yet, or just mess up your opponent's attacks. Either way, it's a popular choice because it just makes your opponent's life difficult and gives you more mileage out of the standby package, and it's a perfect example of the great tech that Green Bofuri offers. Also in the 1-1 category, we have Winning Formula Maple, which is a level 1 level assister that gives a character plus 1k if you use an act ability. This is a solid choice if you want to make a more backup focused decks with less tricks and more straightforward power. But while it's an amazing card, sometimes you just can't fit it in between your combo, your tech, and your support. And finally, for additional tech, we have Shield and Buckler, Maple, and Sally. When they come in, you can pitch a card and then choose one of your opponent's characters and level it down, meaning that they put that character into their waiting room and exchange it with another character who's at least 1 level below the one you chose. It's a great way to deal with problematic cards like Priestess or Rider, but it's also a huge middle finger to other standby decks. So now let's talk about the level 2. If you're playing standby, Bofuri has a top choice 2-2 Saint Misery, which at 7k gets plus 3k if you're playing a legal deck, and thus is 10k on any stage. And when she direct attacks, you can choose a character in your waiting room and put it into your stock. So this is obviously an amazing choice for us. If you want to go harder on the 2-2s though, Bofuri also has a 7k that gets plus 1500 for each character in your opponent's back row, and also has the ability that you can pay 1 and pitch a card when she's front attacked, and then she can't be reversed for the turn. But one thing I also want to highlight is Bofuri's 2-1 backup, No Damage Maple, and aptly named. It's an anti-change that sends the target straight to memory if you pitch 2 cards, so it's very cheap to activate and there's virtually no way to save the target. But these are all pretty standard parts of what you'd expect in a standby-centric package, so let's move to the level 3. Now one thing I will say about Bofuri in contrast to all the powerful things the set offers is that the targets at level 3 for the standby packages are not amazing. It's not that the level 3s aren't good, but standing them by pretty much only saves you the stock and denies you the on-play effects, of which Bofuri has many, most of which are early plays and finishers, who actually lose a lot of their value if you don't play them from hand. There is one exception to this though, which is Oceanic Coat Sally. At 10k, she gets 500 for each other character in your back row, and she has an interesting ability. If she's in your center stage, you can choose up to one of your opponent's characters, and it gets plus 4 soul for the turn and can side attack. Now, this will turn any one attack into a sure cancel 90% of the time, but man, does that 10% hurt when you just take 7 damage to the face despite being super compressed. So what you're actually looking to do most of the time is stand by your finishers so you don't have to pay stock for them. Now, there are a lot of paths you can take at level 3. Generally though, they start with running at least 1 or 2 of the early plays, either the 11k bottom deck healer that comes out early if you had the level 0 Sally runner in your clock, or the 2 or less Kanade early play that's just a generic healer. Neither one of these early plays are much to write home about, but good early plays are an integral part of what makes any good standby deck. But for the finishers, there's a lot of choices you can make with Bofuri. To make the best of the standby package though, most builds run finishers with on-attack abilities that cost stock to activate. This way you can more effectively pay for those abilities, as you have the option to stand them by and save some resources. The 2 most popular choices are Marble Muffler Sally and Atrocity Maple. Marble Muffler Sally is a restander that you can pay 2 and pitch 1 at the end of her attack. She also gets extra power when your other characters attack, and she heals. As she's competitively costed, has a lot of utility, and can use her combo on any board, she's a popular choice in many styles of Bofuri deck. The second popular choice for the standby deck is Atrocity Maple, which is much different. This thing is a 3-2 that gets plus 3k when you play it for the turn, and when you play it, lets you pay an extra 1 stock to salvage its own combo, which is a gate. The actual combo is, on reverse, pay 6 and pitch 2, then burn 1, then burn 2, then burn 3. This is a lot of damage, but it costs a lot of cards. Luckily, the standby build saves us a lot of stock during the mid-game, and Saint Misery helps us build it even more. Personally, this is my favorite finisher of the standby variant. Finally, Bofuri offers us a few secondary finishers. Both of these are in yellow and have some form of cancel burn, free of any combo, but many choose not to run them in standby because there isn't a lot of other standby tech that's yellow, and you need to play them from hand to get most of the effects. But we'll talk about those and a yellow event as we transition into the other Bofuri decks, because while there's a lot of variation you can put on the standby deck, if we talked about all of it, I might as well just showcase half the damn set. That's just how flexible Bofuri is. But now that we've covered standby, let's move to the more conventional builds. Bofuri can build a wide variety of fair decks. These are tempo decks that don't do anything super unfair, but take a conventional strategy and just execute it well. They do this with a combination of solid zeros, consistent level 1 combos, and a mid-game with strong utility, and of course, effective finishers. Now for any given fair Bofuri deck, you'll be looking at a lot of the same staple zeros, but the Battlecraft is Ricky to get your level 1 combo, the multicolored Sally to support your deck, and potentially the split sword Shin to give you some tempo at 0. And if you're playing green and want to pick up the Guardian Maple early play, the Super Speed Sally that accelerates for an extra 2k across your opponent's turn and is also a milled runner is just a good choice anyway. If you're packing any yellow, a moment between the two Maple is a great choice, as she's only 500 but gets plus 4k on your opponent's turn. You can also pay 1 and send her to the waiting room to top check 4 and add a character. Now, while the level 0 has some clear staples, the level 1 is really where all the choices are made. Bofuri has like 6 different level 1 combos, and they all offer something a bit different with a lot of on-attack advantage and power. Now, we've already talked about standby, so we'll be skipping over the Walking Fortress Maple here. I'll also be skipping over the level 1 Kasumi combo, as I've barely seen it run, and even though it's on-attack advantage, it's kind of worse than the other generic on-attack top check 4 combos that now dominate trial decks. Also, the Guildmaster Maple is pretty much exclusively to build with the Loving Sacrifice deck, so I'll talk about it when we visit that. So this leaves us with a moment between the two Sally, Spellstash Kanade, and the twins Yui and Mei. So Spellstash Kanade is a 4k that gives plus 1500 to a character when she attacks. With her Climax combo, you can choose to either search or salvage an event called Spellstash on attack, and the event is a top check 4 Kotsky event. Now these combos can be interesting, but being that nothing else in the set really synergizes with the fact that you're playing an event instead of a generic combo, it's kind of like playing a search or top check combo with extra steps. It can be fun, and it's on attack advantage that can't miss unless all 4 of them in your hand, stock, or clock, but personally I think you can do better with the other combos. The twins Yui and Mei are pretty interesting though. They actually combo with a plus 2 soul, making them a very rare level 1 combo style, and they both have 2 different abilities. Both of them with their combo let you choose a character in your waiting room and then put it into your stock and then top check for a character to add to your hand, but Yui lets you do this when your opponent levels up, and Mei does this when her damage is cancelled. Now this is a good effect on a level 1 combo, and running 2 soul at level 1 offers you some interesting play options, but it's also a bit unpredictable. The combo people most gravitate towards in fair Bofuri decks is a moment between the two Sally. At 4k, if you play a Climax, she gets plus 3k for the turn regardless of what it is. And for her combo, which is a Pants, on attack you mill 2 and salvage an X or lower character, where X is the combined level of the milled cards. So basically the Conqueror of Flame Shizu effect, but instead of going to memory on reverse, she just turns into an 8k beat stick during your turn. It's straightforward and just solid, and blue already has a great toolkit to build around. Now we already talked about some of the great technical cards Bofuri has at 1. There's the 1-0 level down, the 1-1 assister, and the 1-1 switching Kasumi. No matter what colors you choose as your primary combos, these are great choices. For the tools more centered around fair decks, there's also a 1-0 2k backup, a 1-0 back row Maple that lets you blink an opponent's character to memory, it's also a top check 4 on Climax play, and a 1-0 5k that gives you a free stock on reverse if you have a Climax in play, and also kicks to memory no matter what. At any rate, this is pretty much the collection of good level 1 choices. As we move on to level 2, there's not too much new to introduce, but I still recommend playing the 2-1 memory anti-change. But level 3 again is where we have choices to make. Bofuri offers a lot of good finishers and secondary finishers, and as we've seen before, good early plays. Many fair decks that aren't playing the Loving Sacrifice build play 3 or more early play healers, either Kanade or Guardian Angel Maple depending on your preference. But as for the finisher, there are a few choices. First, on another Pants combo, we have Machine God Maple. When she attacks, she's a 4-card reverse Brainstormer that burns X, where X is the total number of Climaxes you find in the bottom 4 cards of your opponent's deck, which is an ability apparently called Icy Tail. Personally, I like the term reverse Brainstormer better. She does this effect for free as long as you have the Climax in play, and on play, you can pay 1 and stock swap your opponent. Some decks run her just for that ability, but as a finisher, while this effect isn't bad, the chance of you hitting enough Climaxes to even get the effect for 1 damage, and also not getting it cancelled anyway, is pretty low. Though it is free and it does punish compression. And of course we have Marble Muff or Sally, which is also great in fair decks. We already talked about her, but the fact that she's a healing restander that doesn't care about what your opponent's board is makes her a very popular finishing choice. The other combo I want to visit is Rumored Player in Blue Sally. She gets plus 1500 if you have experience 6 or more, and on a stock soul, when she attacks you can pitch a card, and then you burn X where X is that card's level, and she gets another plus 2k for the turn. I don't see many people playing this combo, but I really like it. This not only lets you deal precision damage if your opponent is well compressed, but also lets you deal larger numbers like 2 and 3 with basically no cost. It can be a little tricky to pull off, but you can spend your resources on prep instead of activation to make sure you have the options you need. No matter which you pick, I think they're all fine options for a fair Bofuri deck. And then we have the yellow support options. We touched on the yellow cancel burn cards when we talked about standby, but they're far more popular to run in these kinds of builds. First, there's Giant Killing Yui and Mei, which is a good Musashi, and if you play them with 4 or more other characters, they let you put a character from your waiting room back into your stock. This is a really solid secondary finisher. There's also Snow White Maple, which on play lets you play a character for free and then give them 2k power, and then has the ability that on attack you can pay 2 and give a character cancel burn. A lot of players choose to play her as a 1-of just to have the option, but the cost is pretty high for what she offers. Bofuri also has a 3/3 event, Unexpected Bonus, that gives all your characters cancel burn for the turn. Again, Bofuri doesn't have a ton of event synergy to help you search it out, but it's a great alternative finishing option that gives you a lot of inevitability. It's also a very popular option in the Loving Sacrifice build, which we'll talk about soon. But before we do, it's safe to summarize the fair and conventional Bofuri decks as offering a ton of options with strong staples in any colors you want to play. Now moving on to the Loving Sacrifice decks, we already have a lot of good building blocks. So instead of going over all of it again, let's talk about the card itself and then talk about some modifications people decide to make from the more standard decks to support it. First off, her early play condition is 2 or less climaxes in the bin, and she's a healer, so this is already pretty good. Her combo is on a choice, and on attack, if you have 4 or more other characters, she gets plus 2500 power, and the ability that the character facing her gets -2 soul until the end of your opponent's next turn. This is really annoying to deal with. For you, even if your opponent makes it go away, you already got an early play heal out of it, and you made them spend the resources to do so, and if they don't, then you just get a massive tempo advantage. Now there are a plethora of cards now that make these kinds of defensive combos go away by de-leveling them or returning them to your hand, but that's why there's a support package that we generally see around Loving Sacrifice. This 2/1 Kanade is absolutely crucial. She doesn't give any extra power, but she makes your Loving Sacrifice maples immune to any effect that targets them, meaning they can't become the victims of wind, memory blinking, or anything else that says choose a character on your opponent's stage. She also lets you rest her and pitch 2 cards to put a character from your waiting room to the stage that shares a name in common with a character on your stage already, effectively letting you play level 3s for free from the waiting room. Then at 0, there's a green maple that lets you pitch a Loving Sacrifice maple to free fresh at any time, and if your level is 3 or higher, lets you pay 1 and put any card with maple in its name on the stage from your hand by sending her to the waiting room. Again, a pretty crucial part of the package, since even though you'd have to pitch a Loving Sacrifice, it lets you fulfill the early play condition immediately. And you know, free freshing is amazing, especially for no stock. Also at 0, this is definitely the kind of deck where I'd lean toward the Yui and Mei Brainstormer that top checks 3 and adds 1. It lets you add more climaxes, which is great because we want to continue to use Loving Sacrifice as much as possible once we get it going, and it lets you add events, which you may end up using in your top end. And hey, they're yellow. The level 1 package is also going to shape up around the combo you choose, and we already talked about some of the choices you can make depending on what you go with. I will say that a moment between the 2 Sally seems to be the most popular choice, but here we can also use Guildmaster Maple. This level 1 combo, on attack, even without a climax, lets you resonate with Loving Sacrifice Maple. She gets plus 1500 power until the end of your opponent's next turn for each Loving Sacrifice you reveal from your hand. And when you play her climax, a choice called Maple Tree, you can salvage an X or lower character, where X is equal to the number of Maple Tree climaxes already in your waiting room. Now this combo is a little more memey than the others. Sometimes you're going to be stuck salvaging a level 0 no matter what you do, and without a lot of Loving Sacrifices, she doesn't get that big. But in the right situation, she can get really big for no reason, and the combo lets you play a choice, which is pretty baller. So we've covered the optional tech for the Loving Sacrifice build, which leaves us with the finishers. Being that this is a level 3 combo, most decks that run Loving Sacrifice don't run a separate finishing combo, meaning that they're relying on the Yui and Mei Musashis, the Snow White Cancel Burn Maple, and sometimes the 3/3 event. They also throw in a Machine God Maple just to have the stock swap option. Personally, I think combining the Yui Meis with the 3/3 event is the best we can do here, as both cards give us a lot of precision ping 1 damage for low cost and without a combo, though some decks do splash 1 or 2 climaxes in for the Machine God Maple just in case. So, can we take a breath here? We've gone over the basic strategies for standby, normal, and the sacrifice builds for Bofuri, and you know what? There's still a lot more I could talk about, because that's just how much Bofuri as a set offers. Is it the most meta-breaking and unfair set out there? No. But is it solid, and does it offer you a ton of options? Absolutely, and it has a lot of tools to help you play into any meta. This is a homebrewer's wet dream. I love that the different packages and kits all synergize so well together, and you can combine them in any way you want. I had a ton of fun sitting and figuring out what I wanted to do with my Bofuri decks, and if you're on the fence about going in, I'd highly recommend it. Not only is the set fun to build, it's really fun to play. And that really is what it's all about, isn't it? And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.